Um, Obviously, I'm going to be talking about Charlie Kirk's death, murder. Hi, Joe from another Aussie. Hi, Mary. Whereabouts are you? Are you in Brisbane or yeah, probably not. Probably more likely Melbourne or Sydney. Yeah. Hi, Kimmy. It's good to see you again, Kimmy. Good to see you. Um, hey, how you going? Hi, Alex. Yeah. So I'll just start. Oh, Melbourne. That's what I thought. Yeah, mostly Melbourne. It's good to see another Aussie on here. Thanks, Mary. Um, yeah. So anyway, I want to talk about Charlie Kirk. Obviously, it's the big news in the media at the moment, and one of the one of the things I want to say up front is I think what happened to Charlie Kirk, I think most people would would agree with, it's was a tragedy because even if you don't like, you're like me and you don't like any of his politics, right? Um, his politics to me was atrocious, right? And but as as a human being, someone being killed because and again, I have to preface this, I don't know who did it, right? Nobody knows who did it, but let's just assume the worst case scenario is that, it was done by somebody from the left who didn't like what he was saying. It's not beyond the reams of possibility that that could be it, right? So let's just say it was that. It, it's the worst thing you can do, high suit. It's the worst thing you can do morally, and it's the worst thing you can do politically because all you're doing is you're helping the other side. If you like when Donald Trump assassination attempt last year, it didn't make him it didn't make him less popular, it made him more popular, right? So this idea that that's the way you're solving, it's a very as I just want to say this, he must be an expert shooter, yeah. And Mary, as an Aussie, I will say this. I read a lot yesterday on Twitter and other people saying, "Oh, look, he was far away, and only an expert shooter could have done this." And then I watched a few expert shooters who actually knew how far he was from where Charlie Clerk was, and a lot of them said that you didn't have to be like that. Many Americans could have done that shot, right? It wasn't as difficult as people like myself or even Mary thought it could have been because we're Aussies and we don't have the same gun culture in Australia. But in America, there is such a gun culture there and so many like gun shops, and there is so many places where people learn how to use guns that kind of shot, there could have been a significant amount. Hi, Dave from California. There could have been a significant amount of Americans who could have done that, right? Especially with the type of scopes that they have these days. So I wouldn't necessarily say he was an expert shooter. I have no idea who it was, but he could have just been somebody who loved guns. And in America, that's not a rare thing. In America, where you have a cult, but it wasn't a shooting range, it was a high stress situation. Yeah, I agree, T, but he wasn't. Charlie Kirk is not the president of the United States. He didn't have security on the buildings. He didn't have people scoping the area, right? Like if it was Trump and or a president, there would be like FBI on this building, but apparently he only had a few police people around him, and he had a small security thing, right? So the people who were covering it, the police, it wasn't like a presidential thing, so it was much easier for someone to do that, right? In that situation where he doesn't have the same sort of protection that a president does. So it would have been a easier situation for that person to do it than say if he was trying to kill a leader of a nation where you've got FBI, CIA everywhere and all that sort of stuff. So again, I don't know who did it. I don't know their motivation for doing it. But I will say, it's not surprising. If I was to find out that it was some 21-year-old, 22-year-old college student who just hated Charlie Kirk for his views, I could imagine that being a possibility, right? I'm not saying that's what it is, but it wouldn't be a possibility because in America, violence is often, it's just so common. You know what I mean? It's so. I mean, the same day that happened, there was a school shooting, right? I mean, and the school shooting didn't get any media at all, right? And it didn't get any media at all because of this particular thing. So today there's been another shooting. So it's like this constant thing you had, but so in saying that, again, I think it's tragic. I think it's a tragic thing that he was shot. I think it's I think it's a very American thing to happen, right? I think it's way less likely to happen in Australia or Europe or that sort of place. I do think it's a combination of a lot of the sort of gun culture that you have there, and there are a lot of libertarians in America, including some people on Substack who I like, and and who often will defend people are killed here for cutting off someone in traffic. Yeah, exactly, Alex. It doesn't take a lot in America for someone to hi Manny, nice to see you, Manny. It doesn't take a lot in America for someone to be killed. Um, and I think that I'm trying to look at the big picture, right? And it's not about whether this person was a left wing person, maybe it possibly could have been a far right wing person as well, right? You never know because Charlie Charlie Kirk was not liked amongst the Nick Fuentes far right people either because he was too close to Israel. There is a far right wing group of Nick Fuentes and all these people, and they're quite popular on Twitter. And they were going after Charlie Kirk because he was too close to Israel. Because of course these people don't like Jewish people, and they didn't like Charlie Kirk and a lot of people like what they call mainstream MAGA people. So that's definitely a possibility as well. But the way I'm looking at this is not from a point of view of whether he was left wing or right wing, but just more in the sense of the culture in America, the violent culture that where it's so it doesn't the threshold for someone to pull out a gun is so low. Like it is really scarily low, right? That it's so low to kill someone in America. It's almost like and again, it's not the majority of Americans, but I'm looking at this from an Australian point of view, and Mary could probably say this. We have violence here. We definitely have violence here, but it's not at the same level. And we don't have this gun culture. Often in America, you know what I find quite weird in America? I've seen these Republicans, right? They're like full gun lovers, right? In Republicans, and they will show a picture of the man, the Republican like congressman, with his wife, and they've got children, 3, 4 children, like kids, right? And they're all holding, you know, machine guns like AR-15. Like it's just like, and the picture looks like if you took the guns away, it would be like a sweet photo of a family, except they're all carrying like guns. Like it's just a very strange culture for me to understand. And again, I know it's not all Americans. The right wing is very rashy, so they will uh, take well to martyrdom. I'm concerned about any escalation, especially from the state. Yeah, yeah. So I want to go. So I wanted to get that part out of the way. That I do think what happened to him is a bad thing, no matter who it was, because it's also there have literally been people shot in the cars at stoplights because someone looked at them the wrong way. Yeah, exactly, Marty. It's just the threshold. It scares me in America of the threshold. Now, think about this. What about next time it's David Pakman, right? David Pakman goes to a university and someone thinks, well, I'll have a pot shot at him. Split scene, I really hate gun culture. Yeah. So I really do worry about this, that we don't just go, it's Charlie Kirk, therefore it's good, because you have to look at the big picture. And the big picture is you don't want this to be normalized. You don't want this to be like a normal thing because it will happen on all sides. Now, this is what I want to get to is the sheer hypocrisy. So I've got out of the way that I think what happened was really bad, right? And also for his family and everything like that. So let me just get that out of the way. Yeah. But hi Joyce, a normal response to this by a normal leader of a country would be to go on TV, right, and say, we have political violence on all sides. We denounce political violence, whether it's left wing, right wing, or that, right? And we sorry for Charlie Kirk's family, all that sort of stuff. But instead, Trump did the opposite of that. He went on TV, and this is like I don't think like it's very hateful rhetoric. Yeah, and again, it's like he goes on TV and he basically says he only picks out violence from what he perceives to be from the left to the right, and he ignores all the violence, all the political violence, right, including the ones that he started or incited, right, and then pretends like that is the real world. Yeah, so he's creating. So and then they will say, right? And this is the worst part. Then there was Fox News and MAGA Media, and even people like Piers Morgan are some of the worst in the world, right? Let me explain why. Because he has a really big platform. He's English, British, right? I'm Australian, right? And how he gets away with it, he'll often pretend to be a centrist, and he will say things like last year during when there was a Trump assassination, he was constantly doing shows all the time, and he would start a conversation with, "Look, I'm from England. I can't vote in America, right? But he has a show that is based on American politics, right? So he does have influence. So just because he can't vote personally doesn't mean anything when he has a big platform, right? Don't forget Sean Hannity, Fox News. Yeah, exactly, Merritt. And he has this big platform where they're trying to make out this is what during the assassination attempt, and he's doing it again now, right? Where they tried to make it out that that it was because of the rhetoric coming from the left, right? The rhetoric coming from the left because they were calling Trump Hitler and all this sort of stuff, and that's what fueled the violence. So first of all, right, let's look at the first assassination attempt on his life. Now, Trump brought that up, the assassination attempt on his life. It's important to talk about this, right? And I'm not going to go into conspiracies. There are people on the left who think it was like a setup, right? Like it was, yeah. And there are people on the right, who think it was the Democrats. I don't believe any one of those. I believe that it was a young guy who was nuts in the head because this is America and there is a lot of young people, right, nuts. What we do know about that young guy, right, is he loved guns. He absolutely was obsessed. In fact, he was so obsessed with guns that his school basically told him he can't wear his hunting. He wanted to keep wearing hunting clothes. He was obsessed with it. He also had a serious psychiatric condition. He had personality disorder. Thirdly, see again, this is something else I want to say. A lot of people say he's a mystery. Actually, there's a lot of information about this young guy. But when a guy is young, he doesn't have a lot of history and how to have his gun. Yeah. So there's a lot known about this guy, but he was a loner, right? A young loner. So how much information are we going to have to know about a young loner? He's sitting at home all day, right? So again, this misconception that we know nothing about this young guy and therefore he was automatically a Democrat. He was like someone trying to give. So let's find out, because this is really important, right? The details are important. So he's a young guy, and this is not based on my opinion. This is based on the actual evidence that we know, and I'm not adding my opinion to it. I'm just giving the exact facts, right? He's a young guy, right, who was basically awkward, had a personality disorder, right, all this sort of stuff, right? And this particular young guy loved guns, and he was obsessed with the John F. Kennedy assassination, right? He was obsessed with it. He had books and wrote about the John F. K assassination attempts. So that's all he talked about all the time. He was obsessed with how somebody could shoot someone, a president, from a long distance, right? So that's what his obsession was about. So he had all this paperwork about Trump, where he was going, and he also had all this paperwork about Biden, about where Biden was going. Now, the argument from the right is like, well, why didn't he go after Biden first? Well, this is like, I mean, they basically, on the one hand, they were saying that Biden never left home. He was always in the bunker, right? They were always making fun of Biden because he never went anywhere, right? That was the thing. Now, Trump went everywhere. Trump was everywhere. How many outdoor events did he did? He was doing outdoor events every week, right? So you've got one person, Biden, who was barely leaving, and by the way, this is according to them as well, was barely doing any outdoor activities or even a lot of rallies, right? And then you've got Trump doing rallies all over the country on a regular basis. Of course, he was an easier target than Biden was. This is not exactly, this is a pretty like common sense thing, right? So again, you have a young guy who had a person. Now, this is where it gets even worse for the Republicans. When a newspaper, the local newspaper, interviewed him, all his friends said that he was a conservative, a Republican conservative who loved guns, right? So he was right-wing conservative. Now, I don't think he didn't shoot. He didn't shoot Trump because he hated him, and he didn't shoot Trump because he liked him. He shot Trump because he was obsessed with JFK assassinations, which is why he was also going to go after Biden, right? So that's the actual facts of that guy. So we need to stop pushing back against all this because we constantly hear this, right? Especially over the last couple of days, you're hearing, oh, the left is gone mad. They tried to kill the president. They tried to kill the president. No. Democrats did not try to kill the president, right? That guy was not a Democrat. That guy was a nutter, right? A conservative nutter, but his conservatism has nothing to do with it. The reason he went after him is because he was obsessed with guns and the John F. Kennedy. That's it. We can try to add our own fantasies to that, whether you're left wing or right wing, but it doesn't change the fact that to me that makes complete sense in a country where you have a lot of mentally ill young people, right, and with obsession with guns, where John F. Kennedy was assassinated in America, MLK was assassinated in America, Ronald Reagan was shot. How many presidents or leaders in America have been shot over the years? This is not a new phenomenon, right? So again, I have to say that we need to. It's so often I hear Republicans say they tried to kill our president. No, that there's no evidence that actually happened, right? I want to talk about Elon Musk and what he posted out yesterday, which is kind of like what I expected from Elon Musk, but probably, again, I want to go into the hypocrisy. This is the big part of me, right? Last year, when the Donald Trump assassination happened, what I started, and I'm just so you know, I'm on Twitter. I've been on Twitter for years, and I'm still on Twitter, which is, I think, a good thing for if you're commenting, because Twitter is like the home for MAGA and MAGA politicians and MAGA influencers. So it's a good place to be if you're going to comment about MAGA, right? Because you can sort of understand what's going on in their world. Last year, when the assassination attempt happened, all the responses were about, the left has a problem with violence, right? So what I started doing is I did remember a lot of these people made fun of Paul Pelosi. These people made fun of Paul Pelosi, right, after he was beat up. So for those of you who don't understand the Paul Pelosi situation, because I think there's a lot of Americans who don't know the full story, I'll just quickly give you the story because I think it's important, right? There was a nutcase from Canada. He was actually from Canada, believe it or not, who became obsessed with Mike Lindell. Mike Lindell, who's the pillow guy, right? The pillow who loves Trump, right? Mr. Pillow Man. Mike Lindell did this massive tour after the election, the 2020 election, talking about how the election was stolen, right? This particular person became obsessed with his videos. By the way, this all came out in the court case. There was a court case for 2 months, and I read it. I know everything about the court case, right? Again, I'm just not making stuff up myself. I'm basing it on the actual court case. So he was obsessed with the election being stolen, right? And Donald Trump blamed Nancy Pelosi, right? Donald Trump blamed Nancy Pelosi because she didn't call in the National Guard. Do you remember that? She blamed her, right? That was the blame on him, right? So this particular nutcase from Canada, so I shouldn't say from Canada because I love Canadians, but this particular nutcase, he basically, right, started blaming Nancy Pelosi for January 6th as well. He also believed the election was stolen. Now, let's think about this openly, right? Let's move back a little bit. Someone tried to assassinate Trump, but it had nothing to do with Democrats. This particular situation with Nancy Pelosi was 100% political, and it came 100% from Trump's lies about the election being stolen. Trump said the election was stolen, right? Trump said the election was stolen. From there, right, it went to Mr. Pillow Guy, who was pushing the election stolen videos. From there, it went to a nutcase in Canada who heard this, and then he started sending Facebook posts to Nancy Pelosi. He started sending, and by the way, all the posts that he sent on Facebook, they were made public, they weren't private, and they were all published during the court case. So, and they all had to do with him blaming Nancy Pelosi, and this was a year to 6 months before he actually went to their home, right? So we have the evidence of him posting threats to Nancy Pelosi, right? So 6 months, a year later, right? 6 months, a year later, now we have the madman. He he drives from Canada to San Francisco, finds out where the Pelosi's live, right? So he goes into their home. Nancy's not home, but her husband, Paul's home, right? So this is late at night. He's wearing underwear because he's an old man late at night. Now, again, this turns into a conspiracy later on because there's an old man wearing underwear at 11 o'clock at night. I mean, like, yeah. Okay, so that's supposed to be weird for the MAGA. So now what happens is that we start, so that happens, he's beaten up, right? He ends up in hospital with brain surgery. He ends up in hospital, gets beaten up with a hammer. He ends up having to have brain surgery. So he almost dies. Now, while this is happening, Elon Musk has just purchased Twitter, right? So he's now the owner of one of the biggest, right? One of the biggest social networks on the planet. And he said he bought Twitter, right, to get it, to turn it into a free speech and whatever. Right. Okay. So here we go. Someone with a lot of power, with hundreds of millions of dollars. So what does he do? Now, remember, let's fast forward to the assassination attempt and fast forward to now. This is what Elon Musk said yesterday about the assassination attempt. This is what he posted. The left is the party of murders. So the left is a party of murders. And before he said the left is the party of violence, right? So let's go back to the Pelosi thing. Paul Pelosi is now having brain surgery, right? So while he is in hospital having brain surgery, Elon Musk tweets out, remember, he's now the owner of the biggest social media network. There is a possibility that he's in hospital because of a gay relationship gone wrong. So he spreads the conspiracy thing while he's in hospital, right, having brain surgery after being beaten up by a guy who is a Trump supporter. And again, it's not just that he's a Trump supporter, he's a Trump supporter who was there specifically because he was told, right? Because he was told that the election was stolen. There is a direct connection between this man, election lies, and why he's at the Pelosi's, right? Again, when Trump and MAGA media talk about political violence, they never talk about Paul Pelosi. This is the thing. Last year, right, when I started seeing, because I remember so many people on the right making fun or mocking Paul Pelosi, right? So many people on the right, including Elon Musk, right? Including Donald Trump Jr., who basically a while later, the next Halloween after that, sent out a photo of some underwear and a hammer, poking fun at an 81-year-old man getting beaten, having to have brain surgery, right? And beaten up by a Trump supporter. And here you have the president's son mocking it, right? You have Elon Musk spreading conspiracy theories, right? You had Donald Trump, who basically went on TV a month later. He never rang Nancy Pelosi and wished Paul Pelosi. This is from Nancy Pelosi, and mocked the whole Paul Pelosi thing, right? It became such a common thing. Now, I didn't know. I knew a lot of people were doing it, but I didn't know how many. So last year when I was on Twitter and I was noticing that there was a lot of conservatives and Republicans, clutching their pearls, talking about how people weren't taking it seriously, that Trump was assassinated and all that stuff. So the great thing about Twitter is that if you go onto someone's Twitter account, you can put in search Paul Pelosi. And if you put in Paul Pelosi, what I started to find is that all these I'm not talking about random people. I'm talking about people in the Republican Party, right? I'm talking about people in MAGA media, right? Fox News people. I'm talking about people, big influencers online, including Charlie Kirk, by the way. But forget Charlie Kirk. I don't want to talk about him because of what happened. But including other people like Benny Johnson and Laura Loomer and all that sort of stuff, they were all making fun of it, right? They were all making fun of it. Every single time someone came out and said that the left doesn't care about violence, I went onto their Twitter account and I searched Paul Pelosi, and 99.9% of the time they had made fun of Paul Pelosi, right? The hypocrisy here was through the roof. So I just started posting. Every time they would comment, I would take a snapshot of what they said about Paul Pelosi and I would put it back on them. Because I was verified because I'm verified on Twitter, it goes to the top, right? So, so I started getting a little bit of traction on Twitter because of that, because it's calling out the hypocrisy on the right about the whole Paul Pelosi thing. And to this day, like I want to tell you about this one here. So, like today, there's a Republican, right, by the name of Clay Higgins, right? Is it right? So is so today? This is what the Republican Clay Higgins. You can look him up on Twitter. Republican Clay Higgins. You probably know who he is, right? This is what he said just today. I'm going to use congressional authority and every influence with big tech platforms to mandate an immediate ban for life of every post or commenter that belittled the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So now let's look at two things here. One is these people are obsessed with freedom of speech. Do you remember they lost their minds? Do you remember because the Hunter Biden story got like suspended for 24 hours? These are the same people who lost their minds over Hunter Biden losing the story for 24 hours. These are the same people who wanted Elon Musk to take over because of freedom of speech. What's he doing here? He's saying he wants anybody who is belittling, just making fun of it. They're not inciting violence, right? He's not saying inciting violence. That's one thing. He's saying that people that don't care or making memes or jokes about it. There's a difference, right? Inciting violence and not caring are two very different things. And he's saying those people, right, should be banned on social media for life. Now, so of course what I did, and I enjoyed it. I got to say I did enjoy this. Is I searched for him on. I went into his Twitter account this morning, and I put in Paul Pelosi, and funnily enough, I knew I was going to have pretty good success with this. I found that Clay Higgins a few years ago posted this about Paul Pelosi and Nancy Pelosi. Now remember, the conspiracy was that this guy was some hippie guy who was in a love affair with, Paul Pelosi, and, they were into drugs together and all that. That's the conspiracy from the right. Of course, when it went to court for 2 months, nobody on either side talked about that because it wasn't real. But to this day, by the way, most Republicans believe that story. Most MAGA believe that story. But then again, they believe Trump won the election. So that's not all that Epstein, all that he was going to release the Epstein files. So they'll believe anything. So this is what Clay said a few years ago. Now, remember, he wants to ban people for making jokes about Charlie Kirk, right? So obviously, I don't think it's funny to make jokes about it, but I don't think people should be banned for it, especially if you're a free speech absolutist like these people are. This is what he said. That he's got a picture. So those of you who don't know, he's got a picture of Nancy Pelosi with her hands over her head like that, right? And he's got this caption over the top of it. That moment, you realize the nudist hippie, male prostitute, so that's the person they're saying that Paul Pelosi was with, LSD guy was the reason your husband didn't make it to your fundraiser. So this was a story about because her husband didn't show up at the fundraiser because he'd been hit on the head with a hammer, right? So here you have Clay Higgins making fun of Paul Pelosi not long after he had brain surgery. Right? He had brain surgery. And yeah, I made quite a bit of fun. Yeah. Alex, it's up to you. Yeah. I wouldn't do it, Alex, but I don't think you should be banned from social media for doing it. Right. So what I'm saying is I see this everywhere. And I'm not even exaggerating. It is everywhere. The amount of people who made fun of Paul Pelosi, right, on the right, who are now coming out and saying that they should be banned on social media, or the left are evil people, or this or like that, is through the roof, right? The hypocrisy is insane, right? The hypocrisy is insane, right? So, and again, another person, Donald Trump Jr., right? Donald Trump Jr. sent a photo of underwear. I think I said this before, underwear and a hammer about Paul Pelosi. Of course, he's the one now coming out about it, right? I'm not really. I know you're not, Alex. I know you're not, Alex. I know you are. Yeah, but yeah. So I just think that it's important that we call out this hypocrisy, because these people do not care, right? These people do not care about free speech. These people do not care about political violence. These people are frauds and they're con artists, right? And these people should be called out every day. And I worry that people on the left, right, are going to be so, I don't know, so like walking on eggshells because of what happened to Charlie Kirk. And I think it's important to call out what happened to Charlie Kirk because if you say what happened to Charlie Kirk was horrendous, and if you say what happened to Charlie Kirk should never happen to anybody, then you have more credibility when you go after Republicans, right? When they went after Paul Pelosi, and it's not just Paul Pelosi. That's one of the biggest obvious hypocrisy ones, right? Um, you had the kidnapping of Gretchen Whitmer, right? So Gretchen Whitmer, right? She was, there was a group of Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and they were planning to kidnap her, right? Again, these people were Trump supporters, right? These people were absolute Trump supporters, the biggest Trump supporters you will ever meet. And they went there, right, because she was a Democrat. So again, this isn't some person who happened to be a Trump supporter, but didn't like Gretchen Whitmer for a different reason, right? There is a what we're seeing on the right is we're seeing deliberately targeting people on the left for their politics, or a lot of times because they believed the election was lying. January 6th happened because Donald Trump had told his base for 2 months beforehand that if you don't fight like hell, you won't have a country. If you tell a whole bunch of people with peanut brains for 2 months that if you don't fight like hell, you won't have a country, something's going to happen, right? Something's going to happen. Paul Pelosi was attacked because of January 6th and because he fell for the lies of the election. Gretchen Whitmer was attacked because they were Trump supporters and they didn't like her, right? Again and again. Even Ashley Babbitt, right? Ashley Babbitt, a MAGA person, right? A full-on MAGA person who was climbing through a window that was broken, right? And then even she, to some extent, is a victim of Donald Trump's lies. She was only there. She was only there because she fell for Donald Trump's lies. A teacher was suspended today here on Oklahoma for posting online. Charlie Kirk died the way he lived, bringing out the worst in people. The state has said that anyone posted negative. Yeah, exactly. So they're going after people. Again, I don't agree with what that person said, but if you're a free speech person, which apparently the right loves free speech, but not so much when it's coming on their side, right? It's sheer hypocrisy, right? And Elon, and it's funny that all these people who support free speech voted for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump continually posts that he wants to shut down news organizations he doesn't like. He goes after news organizations he doesn't like. It's just more hypocrisy on the right. Okay. So you can't have free speech only for your side, especially if you're the party who campaigns on it. If you're going to campaign on releasing the files, you should release the files. If you're going to campaign on being a free speech person, you should be a free speech person. Ashley's family should have sued Trump or what? Yeah, exactly. Look, Dave from California, I actually have, believe it or not, some sympathy for Ashley because I think I don't have sympathy for her because she was innocent. I don't have sympathy for her because, a police officer did something wrong. I have sympathy for her because she climbed through that window because Donald Trump lied to her. He lied to all those people on January 6th, and that's why they did it. Because he basically conned a whole bunch of Americans who have peanut for brains, right? And when I say they have peanuts for brains or walnuts for brains, in a way, I'm actually defending them. Because if you're that stupid, if you're really intelligent and you fall for that, that's one thing. But if you got a peanut for brain and you fall for that, I have a little bit of sympathy for him, right? A little bit of. He took advantage of a lot. It doesn't mean that. By the way, that doesn't mean I want them pardoned. They should never be pardoned. It just means I have a little bit of, I can, a little bit of sympathy for people who can't think for themselves, right? So again, it's just this constant thing, hypocrisy on the right that we're seeing all the time. The other thing that I've got to say is that glorifying, the other day, there was, the other day, the Trump administration came out, salted peanuts, possibly salted peanuts, Kimmy. I mean, I would say unsalted peanuts, to be honest with you, Kimmy. I don't think they would be salted. I think if you had salted peanuts, you probably more tell crushed packing peanuts, maybe Joyce. Yeah, it's hard to say. I haven't really thought about the actual type of peanuts, but I would think maybe even walnuts would probably be walnuts for brains. Yeah, but yeah, the other day Trump was basically um, glorifying, and the Trump administration, peak exit, were glorifying the killing of 11 Venezuelans, right? So, you know, on the one hand, right, on the one hand, you have these people, right, who are, who are, and rightfully distressed at the killing of Charlie Kirk, and they should be distressed because by the way, when I watched it, it was horrific to watch. The killing of him, right, was horrific, right? But only days earlier, they were celebrating the death of 11 people on a boat, right? So 11 people on a boat. Now, this is where I want to connect Charlie Kirk to, or political violence, to what happened with the Venezuelans, right? Now, the argument that they're making, right, is that it's okay because they were drug smugglers, right? Now, first of all, we don't actually know that because they didn't provide any proof. But let's just give them the benefit of the doubt and say that those 11 Venezuelans were actually drug smugglers. It's still illegal to kill people because they're drug smugglers, right? It's still illegal. You can't just kill people because here's the thing. What other administrations used to do is they used to intercept the boats. So they would go up to the boat, intercept the boats, arrest the people, and just go from there. You don't have to bomb a boat. You can intercept the boat. They had other alternatives, right? But they glorified the death, the killing of 11 people with no, with no due process at all, right? And yet they tell us that and by doing that, and I'm not connecting that between Charlie Kirk's death, like the person who did it, but you're creating an environment in a country that already has a lot of violence. That already, yeah, exactly, they do a lot of. You have so many guns. The culture in America is so violent. It's all that, and then you have a president saying, "Oh, we just killed 11 people because we thought they were drug smugglers." What kind of culture? You're adding to the problem, right? You're adding to the problem that a human life is not worth that much, right? Because you tell them that due process isn't worth that much, right? You're basically saying that because, yeah. So you're creating an environment. Now, this is the reason why I also think the death of Charlie Kirk is really bad and should be really bad for people on the left, because it doesn't matter what you think of Charlie Kirk. At the end of the day, he never got due process. He was just killed, right? Yeah, he was just killed, right? So if we're going to criticize 11 Venezuelans being killed, we should also criticize Charlie Kirk being killed. Because at the end of the day, in both those circumstances, they didn't get, right? They didn't get due process, or they were just both murdered, right? So we can't call out killing of 11 Venezuelans and be okay with the killing of Charlie Kirk. You can't put those things together, right? So I think again, but Trump, what Trump is doing is he's making it all about one side of politics, right? And the glorifying of that killing is making things so much worse, because so many people on the right were like, but they're drug smugglers, right? Again, we don't know they were drug smugglers, but the argument shouldn't be whether they're drug smugglers or not. The argument should be why can the American government like blow up a boat with 11 human beings on there without any due process at all? It just seems crazy to me. And it's one of the reasons why I think this whole violence thing is going to get worse and worse. And the gun culture in the United States is, to me, someone was judged during execution. So, yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can't, again, you have to worry about, what kind of environment is he setting off? Like, if my prime minister in my country bombed a boat full of 11 people. I don't think you realize what a big deal that would be in Australia. Like, it would just never happen. You wouldn't like bomb a boat of 11 people, right? Whether they were people smugglers or whether they were, or whether they were drug smugglers, you just wouldn't do that. And because if they did that, it would change the culture in Australia forever. We would start looking at, people differently, right? And I think that's what Trump wants to do. He wants to demonize the left. He wants to demonize immigrants, and he wants to demonize people like, some people, even black people and stuff like that, right? With anyone except It wouldn't happen in America with anyone. Yeah, exactly. And I know, Joyce, no one else has done that, has done that sort of thing in the past. But I just think America does, just when you add in all the other stuff, the violence and stuff like that, yeah, and look, and Alex, we do have murders here. We do have, it's not perfect by any means, right? Um, yeah, so we're not perfect at all, as Mary will tell you as well, but it's just not at the same level, right? And I do think that the gun culture thing is a thing, right? Even though a lot of people in America, including some libertarians who are on Substack, who I've spoken to, who I love, are very much for the Second Amendment. But I can really see a connection, right? I can really see a connection between the guns, not just the guns. So I want to separate. It's not just the fact you have so many guns. It's the fact that it's fetishized. I can't get that word out. So it's like a fetish. It's like a gun fetish in America, where it's like, it's like the Second Amendment is like this, you know, thing that you can't touch, and anybody who tries to touch it, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, in Australia, most of the people who have guns in Australia live on farms, and they have the guns because they use the rifles to kill animals if they're like dying, whatever. So there's a purpose for using guns in Australia on rural properties and farms. Why does someone in the city, Marty? I'm sure death by guns is not the number one cause of death in any other super. Yeah, yeah, it's not in Australia, and we do have gun deaths, but it's definitely not. Like, here's the difference, right? I'm sure most Americans could get their hands on a gun pretty easily. I would have no idea how to get a gun. I wouldn't even know where to start. I don't know anybody who owns a gun. I wouldn't even know where to go to get a gun. Like, I can't just walk into a gun shop. You can't do that in Australia. So I wouldn't even know. So, and that's the thing, right? If you're a lot of these school shootings and mass shootings that you see, a lot of times you find out that the kids just got the guns from the parents, right? So they've got guns laying. So if you're a kid who's got like issues, right? And in Australia, if you're a kid and you've got issues, it's going to be very hard for you to get a gun. Your parents are not going to have guns. Your friends are not going to have guns. So you're probably going to think, you know what, I'll grab a knife. And a knife can do damage, but it won't do as much damage to as many people. Do you know what I mean? Joyce, in Texas, you just assume that people standing in line have gun. Yeah, yeah. And so that's the thing. Like, in America, if you have someone who's got a problem, and you know what, maybe that problem was only for an hour or two. Maybe they just had these crazy thoughts for an hour or two, and then they saw the guns. But maybe if they couldn't get access to those guns, or it was so hard that they just like, you know what, I'm not even going to bother, then there would be a lot less people being able to do it. The ease in how to get the guns is, I think, such a big problem, because there are so many people who I'm sure having transient thoughts, right? They're having transient thoughts about doing something, but they probably wouldn't go to that length if the effort to get the guns was really hard, right? Yeah, that's what I think. Because every time I hear of a gun death, I don't hear that they've gone to a lot of effort to get the gun. Almost every time, it's just they grab their dad's gun or their mum's gun or their cousin. It's so easy. In South Carolina, we have open carry. You don't have to have a license anymore for a concealed weapon. Just a few years ago, at least, license to conceal. Great. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's so easy for that sort of stuff, on that. Yeah. Again, it does bother me in a sense of, how it does bother me a lot how easy the access to the guns are. But, I mean, I don't think you can get rid of the guns in it. So what we did is, in 1996 in Australia, we had one of the biggest. I don't know if you've heard about it. The guy called Martin Bryant. and he killed like 30-something people, I think it was. It was one of the biggest mass killings in the world, right? And that happened in Australia. And our gun laws back then were not as strict, but we didn't have a lot of guns. But he was in a place called Tasmania. So he was in a more rural area. So it was easier to get guns, right? So it wasn't in like Sydney, Melbourne, or Brisbane. It wasn't like one of those big cities, right? So it was easier. So he killed a whole bunch of people. He had mental problems, right? And then after that, the Conservative government, yeah, it was a really big story. You often hear, Kimmy, you often hear a lot of people talk about this when they talk about gun culture in America. A lot of times people will bring this up as an example because what happened is our centre right government who just got elected, so not centre left, centre right. His name was John Howard. No, I'm no fan of John Howard in any other way. He actually decided to bring in strict gun laws, and what he did is he said, "There's too many guns in Australia, so we're going to buy back the guns off people. So if you had a gun, you could take it to the government, to some place in the government had, and they would pay you." Joe, how long ago did this happen? It happened in 1996. 1996. If you look up Martin Bryant, you will find out about the whole story. Yeah, it was a big story around the world at the time. So this particular prime minister, a conservative, brought in this buy guns. So basically, in America, how it would work is the government would say, "Hey, we want to take a lot of guns off the street. Give us your gun. We won't." It's an amnesty. So the government doesn't ask questions. It doesn't ask you where you got that gun from. It doesn't ask you if you have a license. It's like an amnesty. You will not get in trouble for putting the gun. And on top of that, they'll pay you for it. And they pay people well for the guns. So a lot of people went in there. They gave their guns. They didn't have to tell them who they were. They didn't have to give them their answers, and they got money for their guns. And a lot of people brought their guns away, right? So that took a lot of guns off the street. But it also changed. But they also brought in really strict gun laws, right? Now, this could never have been done by a left-wing government. It had to be done by a right-wing government because a left-wing government would never have had the support had they done it on themselves. But a right-wing government, it's much easier to do because you're always going to get support from the left, right? So now you have bipartisan support. Occasionally there is buybacks here. Oh, okay. I didn't know that, Alex. Yeah. Yeah, so this was a massive buyback across Australia, and it was huge. Made the country feel very safe for decades since I'm an Aussie. Yeah, Nick, exactly. Yeah. So this was a really big thing in Australian history and often used when you see debates in America, especially in the early 2000s, about a way you could get a lot of guns off the streets in America. But they also changed the laws to make it much harder to get guns. We do that here in California, but it's by Liberals. Yeah. The problem there, Dave, is that Australia is an island, right? So it's guns don't. It's much harder to bring guns in, overseas into Australia, right? Because we have strict quarantine laws here, right? So I think in a way we have an advantage because we're not bordered. So if you're in California and you have those laws, you could get guns in Texas, and then I guess you could just bring those guns over to California. So it wouldn't be, you know what I mean? So as we're in Australia, the law wasn't just in one state; it was Australia wide. And then on top of that, we're an island. So that's, I think, the reason. Also on top of that, we don't have. Yeah, you can 3D print guns. Yeah, you'll never in a million years see that here in us backwoods South Carolina. Yeah, and on top of that, we never had that. We don't have like a Second Amendment here. We don't have like this massive gun culture here. So even though there was pushback on this law, the pushback came from people in rural areas, not in the cities. They came back from people who live in the country areas, not in the cities. And they did get some exemptions because they live on a farm. If you live on a farm, some people do need rifles, right? But this was mostly for people who live in city and urban areas. And it's been very successful, right? But again, would that work in America? I don't know because we never had a massive gun culture to begin with. We don't have the Second Amendment. We don't have people who are obsessed with guns here. So it was a much easier thing to do, but it wasn't as easy as people realize because back then, there were a lot more, Australia's become a lot more like central, like it's become more about the cities now. But back then in the 80s and 70s, there were a lot more rural areas. So they had a lot more sway, as where now it's mostly cities. So, so again, so yeah, so it was very popular thing here. I think it worked quite successfully. Again, I don't know if that would work in America. Again, you could also get guns coming in from Mexico or something. So it is a difficult thing. But I think the changing of the culture, the violent culture in America, it has to be connected to guns. I just, and it's the glorify. It's not just the gun, but it's like glorifying the guns. The gun shows, the NRA, and all this sort of stuff. This country's absolutely obsessed with guns. Yeah, yeah. It's such a strange thing. Because I follow American politics closely, but I live here. It's like nobody talks about guns here. Nobody, it's not like many liberal influencers are suggesting to try gun control with Charlie Kirk's name. I don't see it working. No, it's not going to. I really don't think, because they don't think about that. Like, they don't think about, you know, Charlie Kirk was killed by a gun. They think it was just they think it's the person. They blame the person, not the gun. It says secret session here in America. Yeah. So again, I think I think it's just a lot of that stuff. It's we just have very different cultures, and I really do hope it's just going to get harder with Trump, with having someone like Trump, who's just, when he did that video where he just picks out all the people on the right. There's another guy called Matt Walsh. I don't know if you know who Matt Walsh is, but he does have a big YouTube channel. He's part of the Daily Wire, and the Daily Wire also has Ben Shapiro, right? And he came out and did a video just a couple of hours ago, and it got millions of views. And remember, these are the same people who are very big for the Second Amendment, like Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, the Daily Wire, right? They're very big. They're kind of considered, you kind of consider them libertarian MAGA, libertarian conservatives. So they're very big on the Second Amendment because they're big libertarians. And basically, they are completely against any gun control unless they're trans people, right? It's our misinterpretation, twisting of the Second Amendment. Yeah. And Dave, I'll go back to the Ben Shapiro thing in a moment. Just remind me. One of the things that I know about the Second Amendment is a lot of people, a lot of this stuff that came in with the Second Amendment, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is because America stood up to the British, and and basically overthrew a king, right? But when in 2025, you're not living in the same world. Back then, most people, whether it's the military or average people, had similar guns. You can't, if Donald Trump turns into the king, or a Democrat turns into a king, you're not going to, the average person with a handgun, they pretend the Second Amendment was written yesterday. Yeah, exactly. An average person with a handgun is not going to be able to fight the military. This is the whole point that I think about the thing is just stupid. Like, it's like, oh no, we need to have guns in case the country becomes, a dictatorship, and we're going to overthrow them. You're not going to By the way, most of these people voted for Trump, which is ironic. But anyway, but even if it was like a left wing, like let's just say it was a left wing tyrannical leader, they have muskets. Then yes, they have drones, right? Drones they would even use soldiers. They wouldn't even need soldiers. The idea that people in Texas with like machine guns or like little handguns are going to be able to fight the US military. These people are living on a different planet, right? They will use drones. They will use high sophisticated equipments. There's no assault weapons. Yeah, they will use highly trained people. You're not going to win against the US military if you're an average American, right? So that doesn't even make sense anymore, right? It doesn't make any sense anymore, right? You're going to be like, you would just be killed. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen that footage of the first Kuwait War, where all the people were like leaving, and the American people were just killing like cars like everywhere. Rocks and sticks too. It really is this insane world. And so, but that's what people on the right will tell you, is that, oh no, but what if you get, yeah, sorry, that's past. We're not back in the days where everyone had the same guns or similar guns, or people were fighting with knives or muskets and stuff like that. Yeah, the difference between what an average American has and the military has is not even on the same planet, right? There's zero chance you're going to win that fight. So again, that is the number one reason I hear is for that. It's just a false lie. It's just a lie, right? The way that people look at the Constitution that was done hundreds of years ago and project it to now, and if anybody even thinks about changing it, it's somehow you're crazy. Just to me is insane. But anyway, but I think that going back to Matt Walsh, is he did a video and he said the time. So this is based on, and this is similar to what Trump said, right? The time for lowering the temperature is gone, right? It's too late. They tried to kill our president again. No, we didn't, right? Or no, the Democrats did not. Yeah. And then he picked out. Do you know how long it takes to load a musket? No, I'm sure it takes a while. Yeah, yeah. I'm sure it takes a while. Yeah. And so Matt Walsh comes out, does a video today saying the time to lower the temperature is gone, right? And because of what happened to Charlie Kirk, right? Similar message that Trump sent, where he just specifically called out the radical left and called them terrorists, right? Called them terrorists. So it's calling left-wing people terrorists, radical left terrorists, right? And they're saying, now is the time to fight. They are essentially like wanting to start some sort of crazy civil war over things, right? Over incidences that either had nothing to do with the left, right? Or you're ignoring all the instances that had to do with the right? Cherry picking particular stories, adding on things like the guy who tried to kill Trump was a left wing Democrat. Again, no proof, right? Trying to make it out that somehow Paul Pelosi wasn't beaten up by a Trump supporter. They completely ignored that. Gretchen Whitmore, Josh Shapiro, right, being threatened by a Trump supporter, right? All these things that they deliberately want to try to ignore, right? And they're trying to paint a picture by editing out all the things that their side did. The right-wing influencers are openly calling for war. They are. If you look online now, and again, Steve Bannon is a nutcase and he's on the fringes. Matt Walsh is not a nutcase and he is a nutcase, but he's not on the fringes. The Daily Wire is considered more mainstream and less crazy than a lot of the MAGA media, right? They're considered like the more moderates. And they are now saying stuff that you hear on the far, far right? Which is the time for lowering the temperature is down. But here's the truth. It's not the Democrats who are putting up the temperature. It's the Republicans and Trump who are putting up the temperature. Because when there was violence under Joe Biden or Obama, they came out and called out both sides. This side is only calling out one side. We don't even know the identity of the killer yet. We don't know the reason the person did it, but they're already making accusations. And again, it doesn't matter if he was a left-wing person or whatever. One person doing something doesn't make the whole place. So it's quite scary what you hear. It's quite scary what you're hearing on the left at the moment. On the right media, because it's not coming from the usual crazy people on the right. It's coming from more moderates. And it's also coming from the President of the United States. And it's like they want retribution. They're basically saying it's time to fight back, right? So, and again, this is what I think would happen. If a left-wing influencer gets shot, they're going to say, and I really believe they're going to say this, well, this was in a response to what happened to Charlie Kirk. You can't blame us, right? I really feel that they feel they can say that. And again, these are people, right? I doubt we will ever know who did it. Kash Patel is on the job. We're on top. Yeah. Well, I've got to say, Kash Patel yesterday tweeted out, "We got the man. Great job, guys." And then an hour later saying, "We got the wrong person." Yeah. So, yeah. The best thing they can do, the worst thing, yeah. So if these people hate DEI, right? But it seems like DEI was a lot better than whatever they're putting now. Okay. It seemed like they were getting better results under DEI. This administration is the best advertising for keeping DEI. And they don't even know. It's the best advertising for keeping DEI. So a lot of it does worry me that you have people like Elon Musk, you have people like Trump, you have people like Matt Walsh, all right? They're calling the left-wing party evil. They're saying the left-wing party is the party of murder. I mean, think about that. The owner of one of the biggest social media sites on the planet, Twitter or X, is tweeting out the left is the party of murder. Like, what? I mean, and this is the insanity. This is the insanity of it. On the one hand, they're saying the Democrats are too divisive and they should lower the temperature. I wish you could be on Joe Walsh's Substack once in a while. Side note. Oh, Joe, Dave, did you know that? I don't know if you know that I've spoken to Joe Walsh a couple of times. Um, yeah. So yeah, I have spoken to him a couple of times. I'll probably speak to him again. So if you haven't watched it, Dave, you can go back. You can go onto my Substack, and I have spoken to him a couple of times before. And I have to run. Kimmy, I have to run. Thank you, Kimmy. Thanks for coming. You're not alone. Yeah. But yeah. So basically that's all I wanted to say today. I'm going to go now, but I just thought it was really important to talk about these type of things. And I think the important thing is that we shouldn't be gaslighted into believing their lies, right? And I'm not really talking about us. I'm talking about independents or people who are not sure who they are. Because I think last year some people bought into the story that left-wing people, that the rhetoric from the left caused the assassination attempt on Trump, right? And now they're trying to use that same story that they used last year. They're repeating the same story. That's okay. And they're basically repeating the story from the assassination attempt. If you watch what they're doing now, it's identical. They're using the identical strategy that they used last year, which is the left is rhetoric, calling them Nazis or whatever, is causing this violence, right? And they're using that rhetoric again. And at the same time that they're saying that, they're calling left-wing people terrorists, and they're calling left-wing people murderers, and they're calling that. So they're simultaneously saying that left-wing people are murderers, while at the same time saying that the left-wing people are divisive. Like, how does that happen? How can you say the left is divisive, but the left is also the party of murder? Okay. So, so basically, it's a weird thing like that. They're running those two lines together, right? They lower the temperature. There is one person who could lower the temperature in America, right? The one person who could lower the temperature in America is Donald Trump. He could have come out yesterday and he could have said political violence on both sides, which is what any other president would have done, right, is bad, and not politicize it to one side. Instead, he talked about one side and he talked about retribution, right? And then they came out and talked about if any immigrants from overseas say anything bad about Charlie Kirk, they won't be allowed into the country. We have representatives saying that they should be banned for life if anybody makes fun of Charlie Kirk's death, while they simultaneously made fun about Paul Pelosi and the hammer, ignored January 6th, pretended it wasn't a big thing. What they do is they turn everything that happens on their side, like Paul Pelosi, January 6th, Gretchen Whitmer, and they make it a conspiracy, right? January 6th was an inside job. It was the feds, right? Paul Pelosi wasn't beaten up by a Trump supporter. It was he was with a gay lover, right? It is always a conspiracy to make up to basically justify their behavior because they can't accept it, right? So the people at the top, like Trump, Elon Musk, they all know the truth. They're not stupid. They know that they're cherry picking information and ignoring their information, and they're ignoring the information that Elon Musk sent out a tweet mocking the Paul Pelosi hit. Trump mocked Paul Pelosi. All these people mocked Paul Pelosi. All these people many of them said that January 6th was Nancy Pelosi's fault, right? Or it was an inside job. Everything is a conspiracy theory to justify it. And at that level, they're frauds. But when you get down to the average rank and file worn-up brain, MAGA, that's how they justify it to themselves. If you say to someone on Twitter, a MAGA person on Twitter, and they're saying, I can't believe the left is making fun of Charlie Kirk death. And you say to them, you guys made fun, because I don't do that, but I'm saying, but you're a hypocrite. You made fun of Paul Pelosi. And they're like, no, he was with a gay lover. They all believe it. 99% of them think he was with a gay lover. So because they've all bought into the conspiracy theory that he was in a gay relationship, or January 6th was an inside job, or the Gretchen Whitmer thing, again, the Gretchen Whitmer thing was that they were, that that particular group was like, they were baited by the FBI to do that. Every single time, it's the feds. The feds made all those people. The feds made Ashley Babbitt, right? They made Ashley Babbitt go through that thing. The feds made, no. It wasn't the feds, right? It was a whole bunch of MAGA people who got conned by Donald Trump, who told them day after day, if you don't fight like hell, you will not have a country. Think about that. If you don't fight like hell, you won't have a country. And then they put a guillotine for Mike Pence outside, right? And Mike Pence does not want to have anything to do with Trump because he almost got him killed. So there is political violence in America, and I'm sure there's political violence on both sides, but there is definitely more political violence, and there is more higher temperature stuff happening on the right? I never heard Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, Joe Biden ever say anything that we saw last night on Trump's video. Nothing like that. It was always the opposite. Bernie Sanders came out today and did a video that Donald Trump should have done. He mentioned, this was a brilliant video of Bernie Sanders. He mentioned every single thing that happened. He mentioned Gretchen Whitmer. He mentioned Paul Pelosi. He mentioned Charlie Kirk. He mentioned right-wing, he mentioned left-wing violence, and he also mentioned right-wing violence. He mentioned every single one on each side, right? And then he said, political violence is not the answer. And if you think that's the answer, then you don't have the right question. Then you don't feel you have a strong enough case to make, right? So Bernie Sanders did the video that Donald Trump should have done, right? And that's the difference between the left and the right, okay? On the left, you will have people, right? Maybe some people here who make fun of, right? But we're talking about random people on the internet, right? Random people on the internet. We're talking about, on their side, the President of the United States. We're talking about Fox News, right? We're talking about the President's son. We're talking about the owner of who owns Twitter, right? Those are the people who are ratcheting up the violence. There's a difference between someone on Blue Sky saying something and something the president says. And that's the comparison here. All they can find is examples of people on Blue Sky or stuff like saying things that are making fun. But we have examples of the president making fun of Pelosi. We have examples of Elon Musk, one of the most powerful, richest person on the planet, making fun of this, right? We have examples of people in high power, right, with a lot of power, and all they've got is random people on the left. Now, these aren't the same things, right? So again, it's always the power from the top. Now, some people on the left believe the last election was stolen. I don't, but most of those people who believe that are just random people on the internet, right? On the other side, 2020 election, the people who believed that election was stolen was not just random people, it was the president himself, Fox News, and a whole bunch of influencers underneath him. Whenever there's an issue on the left, it's almost always random people. When it's an issue on the right, it's top up, they're down. On the left, it's not the Democratic Party saying this stuff, right? They don't say this stuff. The Democratic Party conceded the election. The Democratic Party basically gave Trump a lap dance. They wanted to show the transfer of power was so peaceful. It was almost over the top how much they did it, right? But again, their examples are always some random person on the internet. Our examples are the President of the United States. Our examples are Fox News when they tried to do the whole Dominion lawsuit thing, right? So again, the left has a much stronger case to make, right? When it comes to being honest, when it comes to being fair, and not ratcheting up and ratcheting up the rhetoric. So the only way you're going to lower the temperature in America is for Donald Trump to come out and basically say this is not a left-wing problem or a right-wing problem, but this is just, it's an American problem. But he's never going to do that because he's all about retribution. He's all about, he's all about being, a false leader. He is an authoritarian. This is the other thing. Like, they're basically saying on the right that this happened because people called him Hitler. Now, I don't think Trump is Hitler. I think Trump is an authoritarian, and you don't have to be Hitler to be an authoritarian. I think Trump is like Viktor Orban from Hungary, right? So he is an authoritarian. There's no doubt about it. He's an authoritarian. Now, I'm not going to not say that because I think some crazy person is going to take a shot at him or someone else. That's what they want us to do. They want us to stop calling him an authoritarian. And then if something happens, they go, well, sorry, that was your fault, Joe Thomas, because you said he was an authoritarian and now this person shot him. No. I'm allowed to call him an authoritarian and also at the same time say, I don't want political violence, right? Yeah, okay. So, the same way Trump can call everybody communist, and he called Kamala Harris a communist. He called Joe Biden a communist. In fact, he called Joe Biden a Nazi. He literally used those words, right? The people on the right call people on the left radical lunatics. They call them pedophiles. They say that we're communists. Now, when they do it, right, they don't have to take responsibility for it. And if you say something to them, why did you call Kamala a communist? They go, well, her dad was a communist. Yeah. So, it's impossible to argue with these peanut brains. I think Donald wants to be Putin. Yeah. So, again, it's just crazy stuff. But anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I'm going to go now. Thank you. If you haven't, please follow me, subscribe to me if you haven't. I'll try doing, but there are double standards with the right. Yeah, there's massive double standards with the right. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Joyce, Marnie, Kimmy, everybody there, Dave from California, all of you guys. I really appreciate everyone coming and saying hi. It's starting to freeze up a bit for some reason. My Substack lives always freeze up a little bit. But yeah, projection. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.